Hi, my name is Rudy, and I am a fellow at the University of the Ozarks, and I will be moderating this session today. And our speaker will be Karen, and um, she will talk about her project and what she's doing exactly in Haiti. And I would like also to invite all of you to introduce yourself in the chat box by sharing your name, your country, as well as your university. And real quick, before we start, I will introduce Karen to you all, to all of us. Karen and her husband, Jim, make grants to end global poverty in Haiti and build resilient health facility globally. Karen serves as a board chair of New England International Donors, or NEID, a community of hundreds of donors, grant makers, and advisors helping to solve global problems. She also serves on the board of the Haiti Development Institute, an outgrowth of the Haiti Fund at the Boston Foundation, as well as Build Health International and MCE Social Capital. Karen serves on MCN's board of directors to help the Millennium Fellowship possible. A member of Oxfam's American Leadership Council since 2003, Karen and Jim have young adult children and 4 young adult children and live in Essex, Massachusetts. So that is a brief biography of Karen. So I will later go back to you.
Wonderful. Rudy, thank you so much for moderating this session, and James for coordinating it. And many thanks to MCN and United Nations Academic Impact for launching the Millennium Fellowship. So I really want to celebrate you, Millennium Fellows. It's been wonderful watching you come on the screen and reading all of your names and knowing that you're from all over the world. I'm honored that you're listening today. And I just wanted to mention that I'm happy to talk about my involvement in Haiti through the questions at the end, but I haven't really written remarks to that effect. But just again to say, you are an exceptional group of leaders. You're 2,400 leaders from all over the world, chosen from 25,000 applicants, which is an acceptance ratio of just 1 in 10. So wherever you are in the world, I hope you will take a virtual bow. You were selected because you're driven both by your deep values and your vision. The values of empathy, of humility, of inclusion, which the fellowship holds dear, are just as important in philanthropy as in social impact work in general. So my work is in philanthropy. And when I refer to philanthropy, I'm speaking of investments by the private sector rather than governments to improve society. Various countries encourage philanthropy to different degrees. The U.S. society is heavily dependent on gifts from the private sector to support nonprofit organizations seeking to solve social, economic, or environmental problems. The U.S. Congress gives tax incentives to individuals and institutions that make charitable donations. Other countries, where many of you may be from, may not have laws that incentivize charitable donations, that reward donors in this way. They may have a more nascent or emerging philanthropic sector. The term philanthropy simply means love of humanity. Although many people are caring and generous, I don't know anyone who said when they were young that they wanted to grow up to be a philanthropist, myself included. So James suggested I share with you how I came to be so deeply engaged in global philanthropy. When I was in college, I was inspired, like you, by a strong sense of social justice. I studied international development and dreamed of working overseas to help end poverty. I organized on-campus fundraising events for Oxfam, which at that time was focused on ending global hunger. I helped organize a multi-campus boycott of the Nestle Corporation for its harmful practices, marketing infant formula to mothers who had no access to clean water. Mothers thought that they were doing the best thing for their babies by giving them powdered formula rather than breast milk, but that formula was killing their babies because it was mixed with dirty water. I came to realize through these various activities on my campus, my predecessor to an MCN fellowship perhaps, I came to realize that I could work for global social justice by raising awareness and funds to support it from the US. After college, my dream job was to work in fundraising and communications for, what else? Oxfam America. But I didn't get the job. Instead, I worked in fundraising and public affairs for local nonprofits, an invaluable experience for anyone seeking a social impact career. These skills are building blocks of a social impact organization. Social impact organizations succeed and grow largely based on the strength of their fundraising strategies. Later, I went to graduate school to study religion and social ethics, particularly with a global orientation. But what really changed my life was my first trip to South America. While hiking in the Peruvian Andes with my husband, two different indigenous women tried to hand me their children for keeps. I already had a son adopted from the US. I knew I could never take their children from them, but this gripping and emotional experience eventually led my husband and I to adopt 3 little girls from Ecuador. Our experiences raising them inspired us later on to establish a foundation that would address the root causes of the poverty and powerlessness that they were born into, to address the kind of desperation that would lead our daughters' birth parents to surrender their children to total strangers. When we started our foundation, I realized I knew a bit about how to raise money, but almost nothing about how to give it away. So I turned again to Oxfam. And one of life's greatest ironies, I've had the privilege of learning and serving for 18 years on Oxfam's Leadership Council, which focuses on the structural injustices that keep people out of power and without access to resources. So why have I told this story in such detail? I believe that globally focused philanthropists tend to be motivated by a personal experience that generates empathy, one that enables them to cross the chasm between two cultures and to see their common humanity. It's your job as social entrepreneurs with your empathy genes to listen for their stories, to find an emotional connection between your work and the donor's life experiences. We need to listen for what is deep inside potential donors that will make them want to be your partner for life. Listening more than speaking is the most important tool in raising funds from individuals. So I've been talking about individuals in fundraising because that's where 70% or more of all charitable contributions come from the US. Again, I'm speaking from the US context because that's what I know the best. So first of all, from individuals, there's grassroots fundraising. For you, if you need to raise money for your Millennium Fellowship project, you'll likely be appealing to your family and your peers, people who know you and who believe in you, or people you engage in an activity related to your cause. The goal is to create a sense of excitement and belonging for these individuals, who will then spread the word and keep giving. This is grassroots fundraising. Of course, To broaden your donor base, you can practice online fundraising via email or social media. There are excellent online fundraising platforms that raise funds for multiple organizations. A good one for you to know about is Global Giving. It posts short descriptions of small budget organizations and projects and creates mini campaigns to raise money for them. This platform lifts up small, community-based organizations that truly transform society. And as you move up the ladder to folks with more giving capacity, you get into major gifts fundraising. This involves highly personalized solicitations by mail or in person to donors who can give $5,000 or more. Ideally, these donors should be researched so you know their backstories before you walk into the room, and you can connect your mission to their life purpose. So beyond individuals, of course, you're familiar with foundations. Foundations are stewards of money donated by a founder or founders. The money is invested, and a portion of the investment returns in the US equal to a minimum of 5% of the total assets of the foundation must be spent each year on charitable causes according to US law. A board of trustees oversees the mission, the investment of the assets, and of course the grant making. There are small, informal, family-run foundations, as well as large foundations that have existed for generations. Those larger foundations generally have staff and focus on a particular geography or sector, like education or water and sanitation. They tend to follow an approach called strategic philanthropy, whereby they articulate a strategy for making an impact, which they call their theory of change. You, in your social ventures, may also have a theory of change. And then the foundations look for organizations that fit their theories of change. They tend to ask their prospective grantees for a lot of metrics and deliverables, and sometimes can overwhelm nonprofits with their due diligence and their reporting requirements. Now, a recent trend in philanthropy is the development of pooled funds. These aggregate donors or foundations funds for a specific, often time-delineated purpose. They generally invite the donors and foundations to collaborate in deciding which organizations should receive the funds. One type of pooled fund is the prize fund. A competition is created to stimulate innovative solutions to a particular problem. The prize aims to fund an organization that is poised to achieve systemic change. And yet another kind of funder is called an intermediary. These are charities with tax-deductible status in the US that facilitate donations to charities overseas, which have not yet been designated for tax-deductible status known as 501c3 status. That's the legal term. If you happen to develop a social enterprise outside the US, you may wish to work through an intermediary funder to process gifts from US-based donors or foundations. Some intermediary funders let the original donor decide which overseas organizations to fund. Yet other intermediaries have staff who choose the grantees and couple their funds with capacity building services designed to strengthen their grantees' operations. And yet other intermediaries add value by bringing their grantees together to learn from each other. Of course, there are corporate funders. Some businesses or corporations may make grants as a way to engage their employees in benefiting or bettering the communities in which the businesses operate. Some corporations support causes connected to the product or service the business provides, or they may make grants to ameliorate the negative impact of their business. For instance, Coca-Cola uses enormous amounts of water to process its drinks, and so it has chosen to generally fund clean water projects in the countries in which it operates. However, it's risky to pin your hopes on corporate contributions because in the US anyway, they only contribute 3% of all charitable donations. So I've laid out a variety of sources of philanthropic dollars from the US. And now I'd just like to touch on some trends I've noticed in philanthropy in the last 15 years anyway. There has been a philanthropic movement to promote community philanthropy around the world, where local residents contribute resources to solve problems in their own backyards. This is often encouraged by local community foundations, and they're everywhere: Kenya, South Africa, Peru, Puerto Rico. There's been an intentional effort on the part of some very large funders to plant or seed community foundations around the world. Another trend in the last 15 years is called market-based philanthropy, or philanthrocapitalism. These kinds of funders tend to use business terms, seeing their funds as investments to achieve social or environmental returns. They also tend to prefer market-based models of operation. For instance, ones that create opportunities for farmers to sell their crops, or for micro-entrepreneurs to receive loans, or shopkeepers to sell water via kiosks, or individuals to pay to use a latrine or a flush toilet. Market-based philanthropy. Now, a subset of this can be called venture philanthropy. Using a venture capital approach, the investors develop a portfolio of early-stage, high-risk organizations and contribute their business expertise by serving on those organizations' boards. They expect some organizations to make it, and others, in fact, most of them that they invest in, to fail. It's like venture capital. And yet another philanthropic movement is called effective altruism. And this approach encourages donors to invest where the fewest dollars will do the most good, which is usually in low and middle income countries, where the cost of services may be far less than in a highly developed economy. It's important to note that the effective altruism approach has no political or social analysis attached to it. These donors tend to not see the injustices that have spawned the problems they seek to address. And the last trend I'll mention is at the other end of the spectrum. There's been a keen emphasis in the last 5 to 6 years on trust-based philanthropy. This philosophy emphasizes shifting the power dynamic in philanthropy and putting the grantee and the local community, rather than the donor, in the driver's seat. In this model, metrics and reporting are minimized. The grant maker places their trust in the leader and his or her team to know how best to use the funds to get the job done. The donor often offers multi-year general operating support grants with very few strings attached. So, in short and in summary, there are many kinds of donors and funders and approaches to doing philanthropy. As you develop your social impact projects and enterprises, I believe it's important from the get-go to discern which kinds of funders you are trying to reach and how. Building a unique fundraising strategy and developing your primary niche in the philanthropic marketplace is just as important as refining your social change strategy. As you're starting out, engaging your own community and raising funds for your cause is likely your best bet. People you know will have faith in your leadership. Remember, you were chosen, right, with a ratio of 10 to 1. You are special and unique. People will catch your passion and energy. They'll want to live vicariously through your bold accomplishments. For them, giving to your work can bring meaning to their lives. Your community of support can then spread your message and propel your organization to the next level, where you can use social media and donor marketplaces to appeal to a wider audience. Always, in reaching out to individuals, it's important to try to connect your cause to to their lived experience, to their life stories. The central work of a social impact career, in my opinion, is not only about what you will change in the world, it's about what you will change in the minds and the hearts of your supporters. I wish you all the best, and I am excited to hear how you will change the world. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Karen. By the way, my dear fellows, you can begin asking questions in the chat box, and we will get to you as soon as possible. You can ask your questions on the chat box, and after when the open Q&A starts, you can either raise your hand, and we will get to you, and you can ask your questions to Karen. Well, Karen, you shared a deeply personal story about your work and how you went through to that path, and you also shared very valuable advice about fundraising. But here's a question for you. You mentioned empathy and passion a lot, and I believe they are very important values. But how exactly can we make use of those values in the area of social impact?
I'm sorry, empathy and what was the second word?
Empathy and passion.
And passion, okay.
Yes.
Well, okay, I think you all are experts at using passion. You wouldn't have applied for an MCN fellowship if you didn't have a lot of passion about something. Some way you wanted to contribute to the world, something you wanted to change. And my guess is that something is related to your own personal story. So when you're dealing with donors, and if you don't know their background, you don't know what's going to click with them, don't start out by pitching your organization. Start out by sharing your story, right? Which will it will illustrate the empathy that you have so strongly in you. And it may trigger the empathy in the person who's listening to you. And as you tell your story, of course, your passion is going to come through. But you wouldn't be doing this work if you didn't have a strong empathy gene to start with. So, but unfortunately, that's not what the institutional funders, the foundations, tend to prioritize. They're prioritizing, okay, are you achieving your goals? Do you have a sound strategy for getting there? It's more the individual donors, in my opinion, but Sam, I hope you will jump in here too, that are really going to resonate with your empathy, and it's going to trigger their empathy.
Thank you for sharing. Another question that I had is, what really, how did you get really interested in Haiti, and what change do you really expect to make there?
Sure. Thanks, Rudy, for that question. That's a long story, but I'm going to boil it into a nutshell. My husband and I were approached by someone raising funds for an organization called Partners in Health in the year 2008 to respond to a series of 4 hurricanes that had struck the island of Haiti. When we saw photos of the damage done and the suffering from those hurricanes, we actually cried. We were at the Boston Foundation, and we and the staff cried. We were just so overwhelmed. So we started to make a contribution there. And the next year, my husband, who has a background in construction, was invited to go to Haiti with one of the founders of Partners in Health, Dr. Paul Farmer, to think about how to bring jobs to the island. But the outgrowth of that was he was asked to oversee the building of a community hospital there because of his background in construction. He said yes. He started drawing up the designs. The 2010 earthquake happened. Within 3 days, he was on the ground in Haiti, and then commuted back and forth to Haiti for the next 3.5 years every week to complete this project. At the same time, because we had already started a fund at the Boston Foundation. We originally had a foundation, but we converted it to something called a donor advised fund, which is simpler to manage. I reached out to the staff at the foundation and said, what can we do for the people of Haiti, and what can we do for Haitian Americans who are living in our own community? Because we have, a couple 100,000 Haitian Americans in the Boston area. And so we decided to set up a fund and to issue a challenge grant for the people of Boston to match to raise money to send grants to Haiti and to support Haitian American organizations in our backyard who were reeling from the impact of the earthquake in their homeland. So we set that up as a 5-year spend down fund. We were going to grant out all the money within 5 years. And during that period of time, I worked closely with some Haitian Americans who led the fund. They staffed it. They led the grant making committee. I learned everything I know about Haiti from them. And then over the last 10 years, from a dozen trips with them to Haiti. So Jim and I came to feel, because we were so immersed there in our own different ways, Jim was truly boots on the ground, that's where we had the deepest knowledge, and also where we could see enormous challenges, as we still see today. So we decided that that's where we were going to put our stake in the ground, that we were going to commit ourselves to the people of Haiti for the rest of our lives. Of course, we also care about other global problems. We care about what happens in Ecuador, where our children were born. But in terms of a philanthropic strategy and focus, we've decided to focus on Haiti. So,
Right.
Long answer, sorry.
No, thank you for sharing. Well, we have a couple questions. We have a question from, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Holly and a couple other people. So a couple of other people raised their hands. We will start by Holly because she was the first one, I believe. So Holly, if you could unmute yourself, please, and state your name, your country, and also your university you're studying in, please.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Rudy. My name is Kali. I'm an international relations major, and I'm currently in Florida right now. My campus is Florida International University. But first, I would just like to say thank you so much for such an informative session. I've been looking forward to this session, actually. But I think I'm just going to fast forward to my question.
Sure.
Yes. So I'm doing my project in Vietnam, and certainly the COVID-19 economic ramification has made it very, very hard to predict what is the next philanthropic trend, because before that, we based a lot on corporation contributions, and it's a very robust trend in Vietnam at the time. But right now, the COVID is happening, and a lot of corporations, even individual donors, they have been, kind of retract on their contributions. So I was just wondering if you have any perspectives or suggestions on sustainable, I would say, philanthropic fundraising pathways or sources that we can look into or we can anticipate post-COVID era.
Hallie, may I ask, these are contributions from businesses that are operating in Vietnam?
Yes.
And are they international corporations, or are they Vietnamese founded and based corporations?
Of course. So for our case, it's kind of a mix. But in recent years, it has been the international corporations who has the most contribution. Right.
I wish I had a good answer for you, actually, because the international corporations, I imagine a fair amount are based in the U.S., they have been pulled tremendously to make contributions in U.S. society, which has been so heavily impacted by COVID as well. And, what we have noticed working in an international donor network is that many international donors are now giving less internationally than they were before and more domestically. So I think you just have to continue to make the case that we are one humanity and COVID affects us all. And unless, one invests in Vietnamese society there and in fighting COVID there, it's going to keep cycling around the world, right? It's going to affect the corporations, businesses everywhere, and ad infinitum. But I can't say I have an answer for you. It's been a tough situation. And you should also know that in the United States, and this is, I'm very ashamed to say, of the whole philanthropic pie, all the money given, billions of dollars given, only 5% goes internationally. So right there, depending on American donors for your work overseas is tough because there's so much competition for their dollars. If you can try to do what I talked about is community philanthropy, where you're helping to create a philanthropic mindset in Vietnam, that we take care of our own, we contribute not just to family members or relatives, but we contribute to community improvement. Over the long term, that will be the best way to go.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Hallie. And I forgot to ask what your project, what your organization is that you're raising money for your project.
Oh, of course. I would love to share. Thank you for asking. So what are we doing right now? We founded the organization actually a year ago. And what are we doing right now is that we're funding first a food pantry for the rural area who are impacted by COVID. And then second, we are trying to fund vocational training programs, and they are paid for women in the area. Yeah, because we feel like it's such a big cycle for community development, and we feel like those are the two aspects that we have the most resource to help them with. So I'm currently working on those.
Good. Well, I think there are international foundations that would be interested in both of those causes. Funds for NGOs is a website you might want to sign up for because they issue notices of requests for proposals from such foundations.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
And also try Global Giving, that platform I mentioned. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Karen.
Rudy?
Thank you, Hailey, for your question. And I think your project is very interesting. I think Jeremiah had his hand raised and he asked a question as well. So, Jeremiah, if you could unmute yourself and state your name, university, and where you're from, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I'm Jeremiah Madon. I'm from South Sudan.
Wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. I studied African Leadership University in Rwanda.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I have two questions and I posted them in the chat. I don't know whether you had time to see them. The first question is about, I started a non-profit organization toward the end of 2019 in the refugee camp because I came from the refugee camp in Kenya that we have been staying for the last 8 years. But it has been very hard for us to go ahead. Getting registered by the Kenyan government has been very hard up to now because we don't have enough money that the government is asking for. Even getting the money to design our own website because the people who founded the organization, all of us are youth. And none of us is working in the refugee camp, so it has been very hard. We try to reach out to different donors, and the question that they ask us is what have you done before? Can you show what you have done before we support you? So I thought do you think this one is not a setback to the youth who have initiative, but they don't have that fund to start the organization before they reach out to donors? That's the first question.
But may I just ask, what does your organization promise to do?
Okay, our organization promised to empower the vulnerable people, especially refugees, through social interventions and education.
Okay. All right. Can I just comment on this first, if I may?
Yeah, sure, you can. Yeah, you can.
First of all, you have an amazing journey.
Thank you.
I have deep admiration for you. I can't get over that you've gone from South Sudan to a refugee camp in Kenya to African Leadership University in Rwanda. That's an extraordinary story, which if and when you tell, I'm sure will be very captivating to people. There is a trend now to support self-reliance in refugee camps. Now that sounds ridiculous, right? Refugees are inherently self-reliant, but in terms of their economic production, because I know, for instance, in Kenya, I don't think it's legal for refugees to get working papers. So you're kind of stuck, right? Dependent on foreign aid organizations to support you in the refugee camps. But there are refugee-oriented grant-making foundations that are invested in developing organizations like yours that are refugees helping other refugees. One of them is called Refuge Point. It's based in Cambridge. They're not a grant maker, but they work in Kenya, in Dadaab. There's another camp there. I can't remember. Where?
Kakuma.
Yes, Kakuma. They work there. They have staff there that, I'll put my contact information in the chat. If you write me, I will try to connect you with their staff. Also in the United States, there is a network of funders, institutional funders called Grant Makers Concerned for Immigrants and Refugees. Now, in the past, it's been primarily focused on immigrants into the United States, but it's broadening. They're broadening their scope to be concerned about refugees from anywhere, right? Living, right? Over 60 million people displaced around the world. So look at their website, funds for NGOs, but also I think the most important thing will be this connection to Refuge Point.
Thank you so much. My last question is, I know you had a lot of experience in the humanitarian field, especially fundraising. I have a concern that I've been feeling like for the last 8 years that I spent in the refugee camp, I felt like the humanitarian services are making the vulnerable people more dependent rather than making them independent.
Yes.
So what do you think should be changed in the way we offer humanitarian services to make these vulnerable people independent rather of them like depending on like aid and donation every single day? Like a UN or World Food will come and give them food, they eat, they come back tomorrow asking for food again.
But that's what I was referring to in the past. I know how dependent refugees are on aid, particularly in Kenya. And I'm not an expert on this at all, but I know that there have been meetings of humanitarian organizations that have agreed to something they call the Grand Bargain, which is to do more localization of aid to develop sort of economic livelihoods for refugees in whatever host country they're in. But the big barrier you have faced in Kenya is the Kenyan government. So there needs to be advocacy towards the Kenyan government to allow people to earn an income and not just in the informal economy. Another place you could go is the Kenya Community Foundation, which my hope is that they are investing in the refugee camps in Kenya. But you've put your finger on a very critical systemic problem in the humanitarian sector.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Maybe
You're welcome, Jeremiah.
Put your
It's an honor
contact
to meet you.
in the chat. Okay.
Well, thank you, Jeremiah, and thank you, Karen. I think the next question comes from, again, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, Shivam Sharma, and you also had your hands raised. Sorry. If you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself to all of us, please.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I am Shivam, and I belong to the state of Delhi in India, and I am pursuing Bachelor of Business Administration from Christ Deemed to be University. So my question, and first of all, thank you very much for giving such wonderful insights to the world of philanthropy. My question is very basic and it's very fundamental in terms of this world of philanthropy, which is that as you have mentioned that the world of philanthropy revolves around the connections and the people which are related to you in some way or the other or to your project. So initially in the initial stages of any project, we usually connect to our friends and family for help for fundraising. But what should we do after that? Like, to give the momentum to the project so that it could reach to next levels of heights, and maybe raise money, which is not being able to given by the relatives and the friends.
Sure.
So how should we go about it?
First of all, can you tell me what the project is that you're working on now?
All right. So the project which we are working on is revolving around three aspects of the societies. It's basically covering the old age people, the underprivileged women, and the underprivileged kids in the society which I live in. And we are focusing on giving a quality education, the basic fundamental education to the underprivileged kids, through the underprivileged women who are basically divorced or are victim of domestic violence of some sorts, and basically allowing the old age people who live in old age homes apart from the families to basically share the values which they have gained, and the life lessons which they have gone through in their life as a part of the holistic education for the kids, because not every time formal education helps, right? And in this case, the life lessons are more important than formal education for those kids. So that's what we are working on.
And where are you getting the funding now? Is it from friends and family in India?
Yeah, initially it's like friends and families and the college itself, where we are studying right now. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, your strongest asset are those friends and family members who raise money for you, right? And you incentivize them. You make this like something that they're passionate about, and it's important to their identity to be connected to you and your work and your organization. And so they reach out to their friends via their social media accounts. They set up fundraising pages for you. There's a variety of platforms that can do that. The other thing is there's an organization in India called Dasra. Have you heard of them?
Oh, I don't have it.
Okay.
I didn't.
So thank you. It's a very sophisticated organization promoting philanthropy in India, from Indians to India. DASRA. So I would look there, see if you can make a contact there. Maybe I can make a contact there for you. But I think they understand the landscape and the way philanthropy is best done in India. And they know who the family foundations are. This is really a very new trend in India, to have families who want to invest in a very strategic way in their own communities. But it's just like what I said before, get those family and friends to fundraise for you, and then use their social media sites to raise money for you.
Certain. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for what you're doing. Oh, and I just want to mention, you might want to think about narrowing your mission to one of those target audiences, either the senior citizens or the endangered women or whatever. It'll make it a little easier for you to sell, maybe.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Means a lot.
Well, thank you, Shivam. Sorry, thank you for your question, and also thank you, Karen. The next question is from Karan. Karan, I think. If you're still with us, Karan, can you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So hey, Karen.
Hi, Karan.
So I am a second-year student from MIT University, Mumbai, India, and I'm majoring in biotechnology. And my project basically revolves around, spreading awareness about women's rights and giving them more and more opportunities to help them become more independent and self-reliant. So my question for you is, like, how can novice social impact leaders develop a concrete portfolio to appeal to potential donors?
And you're thinking about institutional donors like foundations?
Yes, that's my primary goal. We also want to expand our outreach to more and more people, so that more people can get to know about our project. So we can maybe ask for donations from the public too. That's awesome.
Okay, funds for NGOs again. So have you networked with Any foundations that fund in India? Do you know of any at this point? Because I think there's quite a few that fund, that have as part of their mission statement, and you can search them on the internet, women, marginalized women, gender-based violence, women's economic empowerment. I think you sort of have to start by doing research. I mean, Sam can share with you that he's been using an organization that is doing research to find funders for MCN. So it's kind of a specialized skill, but you can start there. And again, DASRA, I think, would be a good source for you. I do know of one funder in the Boston area who funds in the specific area that you're focused on. Do you have a website?
Sorry.
Karan, I'm sorry. Do you have a website, Karan?
No, ma'am. We don't.
No? Okay. First place to start. Everybody, if you're going to continue the project that you're doing now, you need to create a website so that organizations can find you and see that you're legitimate. And on the website, a donation page. Then, again, if you want to raise money from the U.S., you are going to need an intermediary because, you're not at the stage where you can apply for U.S. tax-deductible charitable status. And Give to Asia is such an intermediary. So one, you want to get on their radar. If this is an organization you want to build and you want to continue, let them know about you because they could facilitate grants to you. I think just spreading the word amongst some institutional funders about what you're doing is an important step.
Got it, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Good luck, Karan.
Well, thank you, Karan, for your question. The next one comes from Vincent. Vincent, could you unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Karen, for the wonderful insight. So my question, I have got a few, but I'll ask the most pressing one, is when partnering with profit organizations, and most of the questions that they ask is, what's there for us? And so most of the time, they probably want to use the project as a platform for them to advertise their products, for them to advertise themselves. And some of them might even want total control of the project. So in that process, you find that some of the demands that they make are quite unreasonable in that they want to use the whole project as part of their some sort of a publicity stunt. And so it goes against what we stand for.
Yeah, your connection is
to treat every person. It's not really a matter of promoting what people need, but a matter of expanding expanding their.
What, Vincent, what country are you from, please? And from whom are you seeking support, and who is trying to manipulate the relationship?
Yeah. So there's also another issue where you find that some of these organizations, they sort of take that if we do not keep on asking them, that you're not really vested in it. So they probably want for you to keep on asking and asking. So, and also there are some which might find that irritating. So when do you know that I've asked enough and these people are not on board and we need to stop? Also, I'd also like some tips on getting grants from USAID. Thank you.
Okay, but a little hard to hear because your connection is scratchy. But I think if you go to a potential funder 2 years in a row and they don't fund you, then you should move on. Right? They have other priorities. There's so many problems in the world to address, and they have a right to have other priorities. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of the question. Maybe Rudy, you can remind me. So the question I see on the screen: how do you stop seeking support? When you stop seeking support?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah, but there was another part of the question I couldn't quite hear.
Yeah, me neither. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, there was some implication that a donor or funder was using Vincent's organization for their own benefit, for their own prestige, some other ulterior motive. Like, you don't want to deal with people like that unless you're really, really desperate. Remember, the values are empathy, inclusion. That means including you, the social entrepreneur, in the relationship, it's being very attentive to what the power dynamic is. The best funders are those who are going to put you first, but unfortunately a lot don't, right? They have their own egos. They have their own metrics to achieve. They have their own trustees to please, and they might be trotting you out kind of as a special figure, but they're trying to accomplish something different. You just cut the ties if you possibly can. You don't want people like that, right? You want true partners, people who believe in you, people who will sacrifice for you, people who will go to bat for you. Wow, there are so many questions here. We're never going to be able to address even a tiny fraction of them. If Rudy or the staff at MCN would like to send me the chat over the next week, I can't promise tomorrow, but over the next week, I can try to type some answers, and maybe the staff can help direct them to all of you in a group email of some sort. But they're good questions, and boy, I've been very moved getting to hear some of your stories, right, and what you've committed yourselves to. And, just to acknowledge, this is not easy, raising these funds, especially when you're starting out. There are some funders who love to fund startups, right, under $50,000 budgets. But not easy to find. You have to do your research online.
Well, thank you, Karen, for your advice, and thank you for I don't remember what was the question again. I'm sorry, Vincent. Yeah, thank you, Vincent, for asking the question. Question for me is that what exactly? What could you advise fellows? How can we really make social impact? If
How can we make social impact?
Yes, and do you have any tips for reaching out to people, and reaching out to people from our community and from, people who provide the funds and the resources? I was wondering how you could, how we could help us with that.
It sounds very simplistic, but I think contacting people on your campus, using your community as your fundraising base. That's where you have face-to-face contact with people. That's where you can create events that people are excited about. For instance, I know an organization that raises money for water projects, and they have the students walk around a track, with water buckets on their heads. There's all kinds of creative things that you can do. Now, if you're overseas, the students may not have a lot of money, but the important thing is to instill in everybody the sense of responsibility for people in their own community. And, not just for taking care of relatives, but taking care of the whole community with their financial resources. Not to say that they don't reach out and volunteer and do, service in many, many different ways. But the financial piece is something that you can inculcate.
Right. Thank you very much.
So this is hard. I'm realizing you're challenging me, and I'm realizing you're helping me with empathy for how difficult this is for you to get started. So I appreciate that. And I look forward I put my Family Fund's website in the chat, and I put my email in the chat, and I know that MCN will help me with responses if you have further questions. So thank you for the privilege of supporting your work, the fellowship, and for meeting you today.
And thank you, Karen, for, what you're doing. And it means a lot to me because I forgot to say it in the beginning. I'm from Haiti.
Oh,
so,
La Guerre.
Yeah.
Where in Haiti?
The capital, Port-au-Prince.
And my heart goes
So
out to you for everything that has been happening in Haiti.
thank you. I really appreciate what you and your husband are doing, and that's really good. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And
And
Rudy, where are you studying again?
I'm studying at the University of the Ozarks in Arkansas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you also to all the fellows who came and those who asked questions. So thank you all for coming in, your participation, and thank you for just being fellows, Thank you for wanting to make the world a better place.
That's right. Oh, Jeremiah, thank you. And Rudy, thank you for moderating. I know that's a tough role too. I've had to do it and it's like, it's challenging.
And thank you for being here, Karen. It's such an incredible honor. So powerful that we've spoken with more than 100 fellows today. Thank you so much for the incredible work, Rudy. And I will share questions from fellows after this session. If you have any more questions for Karen, please feel free to either email me or email the fellowship email, and I'll forward them to Karen. Thank you so much for making time today. And we're looking forward to connecting with you on the 8th when we hear from Ines from UN Women.
Let me add, just as you close, I'm going to read a poem that a friend of mine wrote recently. She said, "Our work will not lift all boats or heal every heart or fill each hungry belly. But if we make one or two or many lives measurably better, and if others do the same, we will help deliver more hope and justice to a suffering world." It's by my friend Beth Gary. So go in peace. Thank you all.